Let's start off in America, given you're there again. And Donald Trump, the president, has signed off on this bill to force the Department of Justice to reveal all of the Epstein files. Is this going to be an own goal for the Democrats after clamouring so long to have them released, or is there going to be carnage on both sides of politics?
I don't think the American public are terribly interested in this issue. After all, Epstein was found guilty in a court of law. He was convicted, he was jailed, and then he subsequently committed suicide. So I think he paid the ultimate price for his crimes and his sins. And beyond that, it's just a political game of trying to tar the reputation of anybody who was associated with him. But the truth is, senior, well-known New Yorkers were all involved with Epstein. There's no doubt about that. And there's no evidence at all that President Trump, or Donald Trump as he then was known, did anything untoward other than knowing Epstein. So, I mean, I think it is just party politics that's actually at its worst.
Yeah, let's go to a much more substantive issue, and that is, of course, the future of the war in Ukraine and revelations about secret negotiations between Russia and the US, where it seems Russia is demanding the Donbass, the parts of eastern Ukraine, which is not a surprise, this sort of land grab, but also commitments as to the shrinking of the Ukrainian army. Are we any closer to any sort of reasonable outcome, or is the surrendering of the Donbass an absolute red line for Vladimir Zelensky?
I think what's happening is that we are creeping towards a ceasefire in Ukraine along the lines that I've assumed the ceasefire would take, and I thought that for a year or more. I mean, militarily, the only way to drive the Russians out of the parts of the Donbass they occupy, and Crimea, of course, which is part of Ukraine, would be for the Americans to become directly involved in the war. And of course, the Americans aren't going to do that. So realistically, there isn't any way of evicting the Russians from those parts of Ukraine that they have illegally seized. So if you want a ceasefire, you probably have to accept that they will hold that ground. There may then be a subsequent negotiation, but the game at the moment is to achieve a ceasefire, and something along those lines is probably the only way to do it. As for reducing the size of the Ukrainian army and, by the way, not having any kind of European peacekeeping force in Ukraine, that will be a subject of negotiations, but the Ukrainians would be very loath to accept that, because they wouldn't trust the Russians, and they wouldn't trust the Russians not to restart the war once the Ukrainian army was reduced in size. So that's going to be problematic.
Yeah, and they'd be wise not to, given what's unfolded. Thanks for joining us, Alexander. I appreciate it. Alexander Downer there, live from California in the US.